Great. Well, thanks so much for having me on this call today. I'm really excited to chat with everyone. And I really enjoyed hearing the last two sessions. So, a lot of good content being shared and best practices. Today, we're going to talk about ways that you can strengthen your security. And I am a distinguished security technical architect here at Salesforce. In my role, I spend my days chatting with our customers about their security strategy, their compliance tools, and what they have in place for data privacy and especially for respecting data subject rights. So I will also show the forward-looking statement. I know Tahir showed this briefly earlier, but in case you're a late joiner, I will be talking about Salesforce products and technology. If you do hear me say anything that's coming in the roadmap, please still make any purchase decisions based off of what is already GA, and mostly what I'm showing you is currently generally available. And actually, some of this was discussed earlier in the previous session, so I might fast forward my talk track here a little bit. But what I want to kind of highlight as someone who focuses exclusively on Salesforce security and security in the cloud is that the scale of security management has expanded. The scope of attacks has expanded. I hear from the companies I work with every day that they're concerned with ransomware and the expanding surface of attacks. They're worried about nation state threats. They are really worried about identity theft and account credential compromise. And they're concerned with data breaches and preventing data loss, and also data privacy. And I would say I spend most of my time on these two topics, data breaches and data privacy. And the reason for that is the data privacy world has been expanding rapidly. We're hearing a lot more about not just GDPR, but CCPA, and then a whole bunch of other states that are enacting their own policies, like Connecticut was just in the news yesterday, but Virginia and Colorado are going live with their policies soon. So there's a lot of questions about how to manage that strategy. But I hear a lot about data breaches, and that's because the consensus here is that 85% of data breaches are attributed to the human element in some way. And this is why for Salesforce customers who do put their trust in our security architecture and our prevention and scanning and everything that we do to keep your data safe with us, they really do need to draw their attention to what their users are doing. So we heard a good bit earlier too about human-centered design. I talk a little bit about human layer security with my customers. I really like to think about what are some of those top threats that could result in either misuse of data or data exfiltration. And because there are so many different approaches here, and because the world has gone topsy-turvy over the last couple of years in the way that we manage our security practices, we've seen that the number of attacks has risen overall. So it's very top of mind for a lot of companies that I work with. Now, if you're groaning when you see this topic, the Great Resignation, I know it's intense that we're still talking about this for an entire year. But when I first started covering this topic with my customers, it was because in April of last year, it was in the news everywhere that 4 million folks had left their jobs in the United States. And that was close to 3% at the time. It was a record that was over 20 years in the making. And a lot of the companies I worked with were rightfully concerned about how that applied to security. And like I said, continues. We're still talking about this because that number got broken, that record got shattered in September, and then again in November, and then the numbers just were released for March, and we're still seeing 4.5 million jobs being changed every month. This is a lot of attrition. And for the customers that I work with, this prevents a increased challenge in the form of accidental misuse of data or a higher risk of the impact of a bad actor. So we'll go with bad actor first, because I feel like this is a personality that everybody knows and is familiar with. Somebody is leaving their job, again, Great Resignation, and they want to take data with them when they go to work at a competitor. So they're going to run a report, they're going to download data, and they're going to walk with that report. How do we know what did they take when they left, but also how can we prevent these types of behaviors from ever occurring? So we're going to talk about some strategies around that. But this data exfiltration challenge here, accidental misuse of data or accidental data leakage, these are challenges that I'll find a lot of companies aren't really putting as much attention on as they could or should be. And what's happening here in the scope of the Great Resignation and all this attrition is that you have employees who are leaving and you have the folks who are covering that open headcount, and maybe they're stretched a little bit thin while they're taking on extra work to make up for those open spaces. So they may be a little bit spread thin, they might be rushing, they might be distracted, and they might do some behaviors that are a little bit more risky. For example, maybe instead of really taking the time to put the right filters on a report, they're going to just extract everything. And then maybe because they're working from home, maybe they're doing that onto their personal machine at night. And then all of a sudden you have that syncing to other clouds and other services. These are the types of things we want to get ahead of and prevent, or at least alert that behavior is occurring. Or you have the new hire and they're still learning your policies. They're learning your data model, and maybe they're not engaging with the data in a way that's considered safe and trusted in your organization. So when I'm speaking with companies about this, I'm explaining, of course, the foundational work that Salesforce does to keep your data safe. And then I'm also talking a lot about that shared responsibility that our customers have to make sure that they're enforcing an environment of least privilege access. A lot of that means putting in place strong application security and identity management features in order to reduce the surface of risk by reducing who can access your environment and when and from where, but also what they can see and do once they get logged in. A lot of that is controlled through built-in security controls that all Salesforce customers have access to. Here, if you're an admin, you're very familiar with some of these concepts like object level security, roles, profiles, permission sets, sharing rules. You can get very specific about what users can log in at what time of day, what objects do they see, which records do they see, and even getting very granular down to which fields on a given object can they have access to. And then, of course, your profiles can control things like, does this user have API access? Can they have export access for reports? So this is your first line of defense, is making sure that you're preventing account credential compromise and that you're limiting access to data to just what those users really need to do their job effectively. We do have a bunch of enhanced security tools that can help you with some of your advanced security requirements. We're not going to get into most of this today, but this is something that you can definitely reach out to me about if you want to learn more about at another time. We're going to focus primarily on preventing data loss, which is a function of our Shield event monitoring solution, transaction security. But I do spend a lot of time discussing other Shield solutions like encryption or expanded auditing of changes to data, masking data in your sandbox environment so that your users don't see real PII in those environments, and Security Center for monitoring multiple orgs, security posture in one place, privacy I mentioned earlier, but being able to automate some of your data subject requests like the right to be forgotten, backup and restore, and then mobile app management is really just about putting some boundaries in place around usage of the Salesforce mobile app if you don't own the device, if you're doing bring your own devices. I know that was lightning speed. Like I said, let me know if you want to set up a call to discuss any of those further. For the purpose of today, I'm going to talk about preventing data loss, and when you have these types of challenges around insider threats, what are your users doing? What data do they access? What records do they view? What reports are they running? Are they downloading information via reports or API? We're going to focus more on those data loss prevention use cases, which falls under event monitoring, which is part of Shield. Also part of Shield, if you've ever heard of Shield, it's kind of a bundle of solutions. And I mentioned encryption earlier. This is all about encrypting your data and managing key material. This field audit trail is all about maintaining an audit history of changes for up to 20 years, or up to 10 years, sorry, going from 20 fields up to 60 fields, and then going from 18 months of storage up to 10 years with Field Audit Trail. And Einstein Data Detect is new. This is all about helping you find where sensitive data might be hiding in your org so that you can either eliminate it or properly classify it. And that's a good segue, because actually when we talk about some of those accidental misuse of data use cases, I'm going to demo this for you in just a second. You want to make sure that you have a strong data classification so that you know which security controls to apply. So, all right, going right from that topic of Shield, we're going to just specifically drill in on event monitoring. Event monitoring is the component of Shield that helps you understand what are your users doing on the platform? What do they see? And what might they interact with or download? It gives you security, adoption, and performance insights. If I'm running a report, you want that security intel of who's running reports, what fields are on the report, what records are on the report, which IP address. But you also want to know which reports get run for adoption performances and how's everything performing so that you can make some adjustments as needed and allocate developer bandwidth, especially for things like your custom Lightning components. So event monitoring in and of itself is built up of a few modules, so to speak. The primary pieces that folks think about are the logs themselves. We have two different methods of delivering logs. Event log files, there are over 50 different types of events that are being captured here. Again, security, adoption, and performance focused. If you need to know something about Apex execution or who's looking at a certain file, or again, who's running a report or using an old Visualforce page, you're going to get all of that out of event monitoring. But we also have real-time event monitoring now. So streaming using platform events. This way you can get real-time insights about how your users are behaving in the platform, as well as hook into these events and stop them from even occurring. And that's what I'm going to show you next. The way that we do that is through transaction security. You can build simple policies that can alert you when something suspicious is happening, or block it, or both. We've also recently launched threat detection. Threat detection is our method of incorporating machine learning so that you can start to identify a behavior pattern on a per user basis that's anomalous. It's not that they're necessarily putting sensitive data on a report, and it's not necessarily that they're downloading a large report, but they're interacting with the data in a way that's unusual for them. We have that at the report and API level today. And we do include some licenses, 10 licenses to Analytics Studio, but these logs are all available through the API. You can use them in the SIM tool of your choice. So if you're using other technologies and want to explore user behaviors, that's just fine. All right, so moving on to our demo, what I want to show you are some simple prevention tools. So like I mentioned, when you have all these kinds of attrition events, you want to make sure that you are preventing a user from walking away with your customer lists, competitive intel when they go to another company. And also we want to prevent somebody from being able to accidentally misuse data. For example, maybe they're running a large report and they're putting PII on it, any kind of personal information, confidential details. That's definitely a risky behavior that we would want to prevent. So let's focus on those two use cases, and we can do this really quick. Right now, I'm showing you my demo org, and I am in the transaction security policies menu from the setup menu. And you can see I've already started building a couple of policies. We're just going to build a new one just so you can kind of get a sense for what you can do with this tool. Here, I am going to choose whether my policy should be built with clicks, declarative, admin level, or code for some of our more advanced custom type of use cases. In this case, we're going to go with a policy that's centered around reporting, but you can see here as I pull down this dropdown that there's a few different types of events you might want to go with, including those anomaly events that are driven by machine learning. I'm going to focus on the most basic use case here, which would be preventing a large data download. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the operations. So what type of activity are we concerned with? And because it's a download, I want to go with the action of report exported. I could be doing something like a report run from mobile or a report that's being run from Classic or Lightning. We're just going to focus on exports right now. And the other condition is that it's a large download. So we're thinking about the number of rows processed. And here, that's really different depending on the size and landscape of your org. I'm going to have anything that's over 1,000 on this policy. And you could mix and match a little bit if you had more flexible conditions. So maybe you have a super secret report that's sensitive, and maybe you wanted to put in some custom logic around that. So if it's one, a report export, and either a large number of rows or this super secret report, then we're going to do something about it. Otherwise, we can ignore. So here I'm going to click on the next, and there we go. And here, when I do that, I have the choices about what do I want to fire off when I've done that. I could block this activity, and I can leave the standard message or create a custom message explaining why this activity is being blocked. I could do nothing and allow my user to complete this action, but we're going to notify an admin so that way they're aware that this has happened. I could request multi-factor authentication, or I can mix and match. I could block this and also notify the admin that the activity has occurred. So that's going to send an in-app notification to my admin when somebody downloads a large amount of information. And it's also going to send off an email explaining what's happened so that the security officer, admin, whoever's responsible, can investigate. I'm going to show you one deeper level of this, which is building a policy that leverages data classification. So we talked just briefly about data detect and understanding where your sensitive data is. I've pre-built this policy that looks for data classification when a user builds a report. And what I'm talking about here is on all of your standard and custom fields today, all customers have this, regardless of event monitoring. You now have some field properties that can help you describe the data. Who's responsible for this information? Where is this data being used? What is the sensitivity level of this data? And you can describe whether this information is PII, maybe it's related to CCPA, so you can start to describe the compliance categorizations. In this case, I have an employee social security number on my case object because I'm running payroll cases and other employee use cases, and I have marked this data as being confidential. And the security policy that I've created is looking for users who put confidentially classified data onto a report. So if I'm the VP of HR, I'm trying to monitor for the number of cases that are being opened by employees. Maybe I just need to know what's the status of the cases, how many cases are being run, how long does it take to resolve these cases, and what's the priority. But I don't need to have the employee's name. I don't need their birth date. I don't need their salary. I don't even need the reason for the case because it could be something sensitive behavior related as well. So I want to keep this report really clean and not violate any kind of confidentiality or other compliance use cases. Now, let's say I've got an employee, though, who's just trying to do their job. Maybe they want to run a payroll adjustment, and they think the simplest way to do this is get that list of employees and their socials. But we don't want them downloading that information. Actually, I don't even want them running a report with that information. So I've put that policy in place. And when I go to add this information to my report, it says, we couldn't complete your request. You can go talk to your admin. And I put a custom error detail here that says, do not add PII, personal information, to reports. When that alert fired off, I actually just heard my phone buzz because, of course, I'm also the admin and security officer of this org. I just got an email alerting me about this. And I also see that in my bell icon here that this was set off. So I know immediately as the admin that there's an event that I should go investigate. But in the meantime, that user who was trying to complete that action, even if they weren't a bad actor, they were just doing their jobs, they were prevented from doing this. And you'll notice that the data doesn't even preview here. They can't screenshot it. They can't print it. They definitely can't run this report and download it. So here we're doing what we need to do from a human layer security standpoint to stop that data loss event from ever even occurring. So I know I'm up on time, but I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending and listening to this. Before we transition to Q&A, I just want to really thank you for your attendance and encourage you to reach out to me if you have other questions or want to set up a conversation with one of our security architects.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much. So we do have some questions. I'm going to go ahead and get right into them. The first question that we have is, what are some of the top security patterns that customers choose to monitor?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there's a lot of focus on security right now. So I see bulk access to data as being one of the top areas of concern. So here I'm thinking about who is running reports and exporting reports, who's working with data via the API, and list views are kind of an oddball one, but you might have someone who's creating a list view with PII on it and doing screenshots to get information. And I see this with competitive information, with private information, and protected and confidential stuff. But also I have a lot of interesting customers who have maybe celebrity data, politician data, people of interest, where they also need to monitor who even accesses the data. Forget about even downloading it, but who's viewing it. And so it's really important to have monitoring tools for compliance there too.
That's interesting. All right, let's see. I think the next question we are going to ask is, can the alerts you showed us work with our SEIM solution?
Oh, yeah. So typically the customers I work with are taking the logs generated by event monitoring and they're dropping those into their SIM solution, security incident event monitoring tooling. They could use them in another business intelligence tool. And then they may use the alerts that I just showed you that are Salesforce generated, but they may also use any kind of alerting from their SIM, because maybe you have other solutions, other technologies, and that SIM is aggregating those user behaviors across different technology, and you can get a more robust view of your employees' behaviors and drive some alerting there.
All right. So this next question is, this person is trying to understand how data classification can help improve privacy posture of Salesforce data.
Oh, yeah. That's been a much bigger focus at Salesforce lately, because we've noticed that a lot of companies have a data classification strategy somewhere that pertains to all the data that they might work with across systems, but it's not implemented in the system itself. So Salesforce specific, a lot of companies weren't having any method of tagging that data. So when they get an audit and someone's asking them, what PII are you storing? They had no way to easily bring that up. So we added those data classification metadata properties so that you could begin tagging your data. And then we made it reportable so you could quickly run a report, show me all the confidential data. And then what I hope companies are doing beyond that is analyzing what are the controls that we need to apply to something that's confidential or restricted. Is it field level security, which comes out of the box but can make data invisible? Or is it something more like these advanced tools like that transaction security? And then just as it pertains to data privacy, we also need to be thinking about how does anything pertaining to GDPR, CCPA need to have different policies associated with it than other types of protected data. So this is a very in-depth conversation. We do have a lot of privacy experts that can help with these types of questions as well.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question is, can I monitor for admins granting permission sets to other users?
Yeah, okay. So this question oftentimes comes from the vantage point of SOX compliance. I need to monitor who has admin-like permissions, and how do I know if someone who has customized application or manage users permission is basically creating new admins by giving them these strong permissions or granting people view all, modify all data. We do have some capabilities now in event monitoring. We recently introduced a permission set event that can help you understand when those types of permissions change. And our Security Center tool also is useful from a multi-org perspective of being able to aggregate who has these permissions across environments and alert when the number of those permissioned users changes.
All right, amazing. So we are right at the half-hour mark. So I think that's all that we're going to ask, and we will be moving on to our poll and then our next presentation. So Rachel, thank you. That was an amazing presentation. We appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you.